The red dust of Wyoming territory had a way of settling into everything: boots, hair, the creases around a man's eyes. Jonah Hayes knew this better than most as he guided his freight wagon down the rutted track that passed for a road into Sagebrush Flats. The summer of 1889 was proving to be another scorcher, and the alkali dust kicked up by his team of mules hung in the air like dried blood. From his perch on the wagon seat, Jonah surveyed the town spreading before him like a sun-bleached photograph. Sagebrush Flats wasn't much to look at. A collection of weathered buildings huddled along the rail spur, their false fronts trying to lend dignity to what was essentially a way station between somewhere and nowhere else. But it was home now, or as close to home as a man like him deserved. The main street was busy for a Tuesday afternoon. Cowhands from the surrounding ranches lounged outside the Broken Wheel Saloon, their spurs catching glints of sunlight. Women in calico dresses navigated the boardwalks, baskets on their arms, while children darted between wagons like prairie dogs. The rhythmic clang of hammer on anvil rang out from Hollis's smithy, punctuating the everyday symphony of frontier life. Jonah pulled his team to a halt outside the freight office, his movements deliberate and economical. At 32, he carried himself with the careful awareness of a man who'd learned that sudden movements often preceded violence. The old bullet scar on his left shoulder ached in the heat, a reminder of his Pinkerton days he'd rather forget but couldn't quite shake. "Afternoon. Hayes," called Samuel Porter from the freight office doorway. The station manager was a thin man who seemed to be slowly drying out in the desert air, like jerky left too long in the sun. "Got another shipment heading out to the Rocking J tomorrow if you're interested." Jonah secured the brake and climbed down, his boots raising small clouds of dust. "I'll take it," he said, pulling off his hat to wipe the sweat from his brow. His dark hair was shot through with premature silver, another gift from his previous profession. "Same rate." "Same rate?" Porter squinted at the lowering sun. "Though I hear Pike's been making noise about bringing in his own freight haulers. Might could affect business." Jedediah Pike. The name left a sour taste in Jonah's mouth that had nothing to do with trail dust. The rancher owned the largest spread in the valley and had fingers in more pies than a baker's dozen. "Let him," Jonah said. "Man wants to pay more for less reliable service. That's his business." He unhitched his team and led them to the livery, where old Moses tended to them with the same care he'd shown horses for 40 years. The familiar smell of hay and horse sweat was almost comforting after the alkali desert. Almost. As Jonah walked back toward the boarding house where he kept a room, he noticed a crowd gathered near the schoolhouse. Curious despite himself, he altered his path. In the center of the group stood a woman he recognized as the town's schoolteacher, though he'd never formally met her. Lily Moreno. He'd heard widow of that Mexican fellow who'd tried to make a go of farming out by Willow Creek. She was a sight to stir any man's blood, even one as determinedly solitary as Jonah. Not beautiful in the conventional sense, perhaps, but striking with dark hair pinned up in a practical style, and skin that spoke of her mixed heritage. It was her eyes that held him, though dark as coffee and twice as likely to keep a man awake at night, currently flashing with indignation as she faced down Cyrus Whitman, one of Pike's foremen. "I said the answer is no. Mr. Whitman," she was saying, her voice carrying that particular quality of steel wrapped in velvet that certain women mastered. "That land belonged to my husband, God rest his soul, and now it belongs to me. It's not for sale." Whitman, a man who looked like he'd been carved from the same rock as the surrounding mesas, spat tobacco juice dangerously close to her boots. "Now, Mrs. Moreno, you ain't being practical. What's a woman alone gonna do with all that land, especially land that ain't producing nothing but tumbleweeds?" "That's my concern, not yours." Lily's chin lifted a fraction. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have lessons to prepare." She turned to go, but Whitman grabbed her arm. The crowd tensed, and Jonah found himself moving forward before he'd made a conscious decision to do so. "The lady said no," Jonah said quietly, his voice carrying despite its low volume. Years of practice had taught him that the most dangerous men rarely needed to shout. Whitman's hand dropped, and he turned to face Jonah with a sneer. "This ain't your business, drifter." "Maybe not," Jonah agreed, keeping his hands loose at his sides. "But a man putting unwanted hands on a lady, that makes it everybody's business." The foreman's face reddened. "You know who I work for?" "I know." Jonah's gray eyes never wavered. "Question is, does Pike know his foreman's out here strong-arming widows in broad daylight?" The two men stared at each other while the crowd held its breath. Jonah had faced down plenty of hard cases in his time, men who'd kill you for your boots or the color of your eyes. Whitman was a bully, but bullies were predictable. They pushed until they met something that pushed back harder. After a long moment, Whitman stepped back. "This ain't over," he muttered, then shouldered his way through the crowd. The tension broke like a fever. People began to disperse, conversations resuming in low murmurs. Lily Moreno stood her ground, studying Jonah with those dark eyes. "I didn't need rescuing, Mr. Hayes, Jonah Hayes." He touched the brim of his hat. "And I wasn't rescuing, just evening the odds a bit." A smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "Well, Mr. Hayes, I suppose I should thank you for your odds evening, though I assure you, I've dealt with worse than Cyrus Whitman." "I don't doubt it, ma'am." She studied him a moment longer, and Jonah had the uncomfortable feeling she was seeing more than he intended to show. "You're the freight hauler, aren't you? The one who boards at Mrs. Mackay's." "That's right." "My students speak of you. They say you have a gray horse that won't let anyone else near it." Jonah thought of Ash, the Mustang he'd gentled but never truly tamed. Children notice things. "Yes, they do." She adjusted her books, preparing to leave. "Well, good day, Mr. Hayes, and thank you again, even if I didn't need it." She walked away with the kind of dignity that made calico look like silk. Jonah watched her go, then cursed himself for watching. He'd come to Sagebrush Flats to disappear, to live quiet and die quieter. The last thing he needed was to get tangled up with a woman who had trouble following her like a dust devil. But as he made his way to Mrs. Mackay's boarding house, he couldn't shake the image of those coffee-dark eyes or the way she'd stood up to Whitman without a tremor. Some women would have shrunk back. Some would have cried. Lily Moreno had done neither. The boarding house was a two-story affair that had seen better days, but Mrs. Mackay kept it clean and the food was decent. Jonah climbed the stairs to his room, a sparse space containing a bed, washstand, and the few possessions he allowed himself. His leather notebook lay on the small table by the window, and he sat down to make his daily entry. August 13th, 1889. Another shipment delivered without incident. Town feels restless like the air before a thunderstorm. Met the schoolteacher today, Lily Moreno, trouble with Pike's man. Should have walked away but didn't. Old habits. Note to self, stay clear of the widow Moreno. Nothing good comes from getting involved. He closed the notebook and stared out the window at the setting sun painting the mountains purple and gold. Somewhere out there, Cottonwood Creek ran clear and cold, the place where he'd someday build a small ranch. A place for horses, not people. A place where the past couldn't find him. The next morning came early, as mornings always did in Sagebrush Flats. Jonah was at the freight office before dawn, loading supplies for the Rocking J Ranch. The work was honest, if hard, and it kept his hands busy and his mind empty. Or it usually did. Today, his thoughts kept drifting to Dark Eyes and the way a certain schoolteacher had said his name. "You're wool gathering, Hayes," Samuel Porter observed, checking the manifest. "That's not like you." Jonah secured the last crate with more force than necessary. "Just tired." "Uh-huh." Porter's knowing look was irritating. "Wouldn't have nothing to do with yesterday's excitement by the schoolhouse. News travels fast. Only entertainment we got in this town. Sides, it ain't every day someone faces down one of Pike's boys. You made an enemy there." "Won't be the first." Porter leaned against the wagon wheel, his expression serious. Maybe not, but Pike's different. Man's got ambitions bigger than this valley. Word is he's been buying up land left and right. Sometimes, whether folks want to sell or not. The Moreno place. Among others, that section butts up against Pike's eastern boundary. Plus, there's been talk. Oh, what kind of talk? Porter glanced around, then lowered his voice. Railroad surveyor came through last month. Stayed real quiet like. But my nephew works at the hotel. Heard things. They might be planning to run a new line through here, depending on what they find. What they find? Minerals, silver, maybe copper, the kind of thing that turns a sleepy town into a boom town overnight. Porter straightened up. Course, that's just talk. But if it's true, land prices are about to go through the roof. A smart man might start buying up property now, while it's still cheap. Or forcing people to sell. Jonah thought. He climbed onto the wagon seat and gathered the reins. I'll be back by nightfall. The 20-mile ride to the Rocking J gave him plenty of time to think. The landscape rolled by in shades of brown and gold, punctuated by the green ribbons of creek beds and the dark smudges of pine on distant ridges. It was hard country, beautiful in its harshness, demanding respect from anyone who tried to make a living from it. By the time he returned to town, the sun was dropping toward the mountains and his shoulder was aching fierce. The old wound always complained after a long day of driving. He was looking forward to a meal and his narrow bed when he noticed the smoke. Black and greasy. It rose from the direction of Main Street. Jonah urged his tired mules to a faster pace, dread settling in his stomach like a stone. As he rounded the last corner, he saw the source Mabel's kitchen was ablaze. Half the town had formed a bucket brigade, passing water from the well to throw on the flames. It was a losing battle. The fire had too much of a head start. Jonah jumped from the wagon and joined the line, adding his efforts to the fight. "Where's Mrs. Quinn?" he asked the man next to him. "Got out safe, thank the Lord. But..." The man's face was grim. "The school teacher was inside when it started? Ain't nobody seen her come out." Jonah's blood turned to ice. Without thinking, he broke from the line and ran toward the burning building. Someone shouted behind him, but he didn't stop. The front entrance was an inferno, but he remembered a back door from his occasional meals there. He circled the building, found the door, and kicked it open. Smoke poured out, thick and choking. Jonah pulled his bandana over his nose and plunged inside. The heat was like a living thing, pressing against him from all sides. He could barely see, barely breathe. "Mrs. Moreno," he shouted, then dissolved into coughing. No answer. He dropped to his hands and knees where the air was marginally clearer and crawled forward, feeling his way. His hand touched fabric, a dress. He followed it up to find Lily Moreno unconscious on the floor, overcome by smoke. Without hesitation, he gathered her into his arms and struggled to his feet. The world swam dizzyingly, but he forced himself to move, to find the door, to get them both out of this hell. Fresh air hit him like a blessing. He staggered away from the building, still carrying Lily, and collapsed on the boardwalk just as the roof caved in with a tremendous crash. Hands reached for them. Someone took Lily from his arms, while others helped him sit up. "She breathing?" he asked hoarsely. "Yes," Doc Holcomb confirmed, bending over her still form. "Smoke got to her, but she'll be all right. You got her out just in time." As if responding to the doctor's words, Lily's eyes fluttered open. She looked confused, then focused on Jonah's soot-blackened face. "Mr. Hayes." "Ma'am." He managed a tired smile. "Seems I'm making a habit of evening those odds." She started to laugh, then coughed instead. Doc Holcomb helped her sit up, and someone brought water for them both. As Jonah drank, he became aware of Sheriff Beauregard Collins standing nearby, his weathered face grave. "Hell of a thing," the sheriff said. "Fire started in the storeroom. Near as we can tell, Mabel says she didn't have nothing burning back there." Jonah met the older man's eyes. They both knew what that meant. In a town built mostly of wood, fire was the ultimate weapon and the ultimate terror. "Mrs. Moreno was having supper," Mabel Quinn said, wringing her hands. "I was up front when I smelled the smoke. By the time I got everybody out—" She trailed off, tears cutting tracks through the soot on her face. "You did fine, Mabel," the sheriff assured her. "Everybody got out alive. That's what matters." But as Jonah helped Lily to her feet, noting how she swayed slightly and how his hand automatically went to steady her, he knew this was just the beginning. Someone had sent a message tonight, written in flame and smoke. The question was whether it was meant for Mabel, who heard every piece of gossip in town, or for the stubborn school teacher who wouldn't sell her land. Either way, Jonah realized with a sinking feeling he was already more involved than he'd ever intended to be. As he walked Lily to the doctor's office, her weight slight against his side, he thought of his notebook entry from the night before. Stay clear of the widow Moreno. He'd written. The universe, it seemed, had other plans. The morning after, the fire dawned gray and smoky, as if the sky itself bore witness to the previous night's violence. Lily Moreno stood before the charred ruins of Mabel's kitchen, a letter clutched in her hand. The county seal on the envelope had been her first warning. The contents had been her second. Foreclosure, Jonah Hayes read over her shoulder, having appeared as silently as morning mist. His presence had become oddly comforting in the past day. The man who'd pulled her from flames had earned that much. On what grounds? Back taxes, apparently. Lily's voice was steady, but her knuckles were white where she gripped the paper. According to this, my late husband owed 3 years' worth, which is interesting, considering I have receipts showing he paid them in full. Jonah studied the document with the careful attention of a man who'd seen his share of legal manipulations. The signature at the bottom was smudged, the county seal slightly off-center. This came this morning. Special delivery? She laughed bitterly. One might almost think someone was eager to catch me while I was still shaken from last night. One might. Jonah handed the letter back. You planning to fight it? With what my teacher's salary barely keeps me fed, legal battles require money I don't have. She folded the letter with precise movements, as if controlling this small thing could somehow control the larger chaos. They're giving me 30 days to pay or vacate. The receipts you mentioned, where are they? In my husband's old desk at the ranch. I was planning to ride out there this weekend to start cleaning the place up. She paused, studying him. Why do you ask? Because if someone's playing games with legal documents, those receipts might be the only thing standing between you and losing everything. Jonah glanced at the sun. I don't have a freight run today. We could ride out there now, get those papers somewhere safe. You shouldn't go alone, not after last night. Lily wanted to argue he could see it in the set of her jaw, but practicality won. I suppose you're right. Give me an hour to arrange for someone to watch my students. They met at the livery, where Jonah had already saddled Ash and a gentle mare for Lily. The gray Mustang eyed her with typical suspicion, but submitted to Jonah's quiet words. As they rode out of town, Lily noticed how naturally he sat his horse, how his eyes constantly scanned the horizon. You weren't always a freight hauler, she observed. No. When he didn't elaborate, she didn't push. They rode in companionable silence through the sage-dotted landscape, the morning air still cool enough to be pleasant. After an hour, they crested a rise, and Lily pointed to a cluster of buildings nestled in a valley where cottonwoods marked the presence of water. There, Willow Creek Ranch. Her voice softened. Miguel had such dreams for this place. The ranch had the abandoned look of dreams deferred. Fences sagged, tumbleweeds piled against the barn, and the windmill creaked mournfully in the breeze. But the bones were good solid construction, good water access, decent grazing land. How long since you've been out here? Jonah asked as they approached the house. 6 months, maybe more. I couldn't. She trailed off. then straightened her shoulders. I couldn't face it. Foolish, I know. Not foolish, human. They dismounted and tied their horses to the porch rail. The front door opened with a groan of neglect. Inside, dust motes danced in shafts of sunlight, and everything waited exactly as it had been, left a life interrupted mid-sentence. Lily led the way to a small office where a desk stood beneath a window. She opened drawers methodically until she found a leather portfolio. Here, she said, then frowned. That's odd. What? The tax receipts. They're not. She shuffled through papers frantically. They were right here. I saw them after Miguel died, when I was going through his papers. Jonah examined the desk more carefully. Scratches on the lock suggested forced entry, though skillfully done. Someone's been here. But who would? Lily stopped, the color draining from her face. Oh, of course. How stupid of me. You're not stupid. You're up against people who've done this before. Jonah moved to the window, checking sight lines. We should... The sound of horses interrupted him. Multiple riders, coming fast. Jonah drew his colt in one smooth motion, pushing Lily behind him. Back door. Through the kitchen. They moved quickly but quietly through the house. Jonah risked a glance through a side window and counted 6 riders, all armed. At their head rode Cole Maddox, whose reputation had reached even Sagebrush Flats. Gun for hire, utterly without conscience. Worked for whoever paid best. Old friends of yours, Lily whispered. In a manner of speaking. Jonah had crossed paths with Maddox during his Pinkerton days. Neither encounter had ended well. We need to move. Now. They slipped out the back as boots thundered on the front porch. The barn was closer than their horses, and Jonah pulled Lily inside just as the front door crashed open. Through gaps in the barn walls, they watched men ransack the house. Check the barn. Maddox's voice carried clearly. Hayes ain't stupid enough to sit in the house like a turkey at Christmas. Jonah scanned their surroundings. The hayloft offered concealment, but no escape. The back door was visible from the house, but there a trap door in the floor, probably leading to a root cellar. He pointed, and Lily nodded understanding. They lifted the door carefully, wincing at every creak. Below, darkness beckoned. Jonah dropped down first, then caught Lily as she followed. He eased the door closed just as Boots entered the barn. The cellar was cramped and musty, filled with forgotten preserves and farm equipment. They pressed against the earthen wall, barely breathing. Above, floorboards creaked under searching feet. Nothing here. Someone called. Check again. Maddox ordered, and somebody grabbed their horses. They can't have gone far on foot. Lily's hand found Jonah's in the darkness, squeezing tight. He squeezed back, trying to convey reassurance he didn't feel. If Maddox found them in this hole, they were finished. Minutes crawled by like hours. Finally, the footsteps retreated. They heard horses leaving, the sound fading into distance. Still they waited, counting heartbeats, until Jonah judged it safe to investigate. He eased the trapdoor open an inch. Sunlight and silence greeted him. Another few inches. The barn appeared empty. He climbed out, then helped Lily up. They took our horses, she said unnecessarily. They'll expect us to head back to town on foot. We'll go the other direction. Jonah studied the horizon. There's a line shack about 5 miles north. We can hole up there until dark. You know this country well for a newcomer. I make it my business to know the territory I work in. He didn't mention the hours spent memorizing every trail, every hiding spot, old habits from when knowing the land meant the difference between living and dying. They set out across country, keeping to low ground and what cover they could find. The sun climbed higher, turning their walk into an ordeal of heat and thirst. Lily never complained, matching him stride for stride despite her dress and boots unsuited for rough travel. The line shack appeared just when Jonah was beginning to worry he'd miscalculated. It wasn't much 4 walls and a roof, but it offered shade and a hand pump that still produced water. They drank deeply. Then Lily sank onto a rough bench, while Jonah kept watch through the single window. "They knew we'd be there," Lily said eventually. "This wasn't random." "No, it wasn't." Jonah considered how much to tell her. "That man leading them coal mattocks, he works for whoever pays best, and he doesn't come cheap." "You know him?" "We've met." Jonah touched the scar on his shoulder absently. "Different life. The life where you learn to draw a gun faster than thought and memorize escape routes." When he looked at her sharply, she smiled tiredly. "I'm a schoolteacher. Mr. Hayes. I observe people for a living. You're no simple freight hauler." "I am now." "But you weren't always Pinkerton." He nodded reluctantly. 8 years. Quit 3 years ago." "Why?" "Because I looked in the mirror one day and didn't recognize the man staring back." The words came out harsher than intended. "Because the line between justice and vengeance got so blurred I couldn't see it anymore." Lily was quiet for a long moment. "My husband used to say that a man's past shapes him but doesn't define him. That what matters is who he chooses to be today. Your husband sounds like he was a wise man." "He was also a dreamer, which is probably what got him killed." At Jonah's questioning look, she continued, "They said it was an accident. His horse spooked, threw him into a ravine, but Miguel rode like he was born to it. And when I saw his body—" She stopped, composed herself. "There were marks that didn't match a fall." "You think he was murdered?" "I think he asked too many questions about why Pike wanted our land so badly. I think he found something he wasn't supposed to find." She met Jonah's eyes. "And I think that's why they're coming after me now." Jonah moved from the window to sit beside her. Up close, he could see the exhaustion she was fighting, the fear she wouldn't voice. "What do you want to do?" "What I want is my life back, my husband back, my home secure and my students safe." She laughed shakily. "What I'll settle for is understanding why. Why our land? Why now? What's so important that they'd burn buildings and forge documents?" "The railroad rumors." "Maybe, but there's something more. Miguel found something in the hills behind our property. He was excited about it, said it would change everything, but he died before he could show me." Jonah stood abruptly, pieces clicking together in his mind. "When I was ambushed last week, I was carrying a shipment for Frontier and Rail Syndicate. Supposed to be payroll, but it wasn't. It was surveying equipment and mineral assay gear." "You think they're looking for silver?" "Or copper, or something else valuable enough to kill for." He returned to the window, checking the horizon. "Sun's getting low. We should move soon. Back to town." "Eventually. But first, I want to swing by where I was ambushed. If I'm right, it's not far from your property line." They left as shadows grew long, taking a circuitous route that avoided open ground. Jonah led them to a narrow canyon where rock walls still showed scorch marks from gunfire. He searched the ground carefully until he found what he sought, a brass plate from surveying equipment, half buried in sand. "Look at this," he said, brushing it clean. Etched on the surface was a grid map. Even in the fading light, they could make out property lines. The Willow Creek Ranch was clearly marked, with notations in the margins. "Those symbols," Lily pointed. "What are they?" Jonah squinted. "Geological markers, and unless I'm wrong, they're indicating significant deposits right under your land." "So that's what Miguel found. That's why they want—" She broke off as Jonah suddenly tensed. "Riders," he said quietly. "Coming this way." They scrambled up the canyon wall, finding shelter behind a cluster of boulders just as 3 men rounded the bend below. Not Maddox's crew, these wore badges. "Told you they'd head for town." One was saying, "Pike wants them found tonight." Another replied, "He's got plans for that property, and the woman's making things complicated." "What about Hayes?" "Accidents happen. Man who hauls freight through dangerous country. Shame if his wagon went over a cliff." They waited until the deputies passed, then made their way carefully down. Full dark had fallen, making travel treacherous but providing cover. Hours later, footsore and weary, they approached the outskirts of Sagebrush Flats. "We can't go to the sheriff," Lily said. "Not if his own deputies are working for Pike." "Agreed. But Sheriff Collins strikes me as honest. It's the men around him who've been bought." Jonah considered their options. Doc Holcomb's place. He's neutral ground, and you need those feet looked at. Lily didn't argue, which told him how much pain she was in. They kept to back alleys, avoiding the main street. The doctor's house was dark except for a single lamp in his study. Jonah tapped quietly on the back door. Doc Holcomb answered quickly, taking in their disheveled appearance with a professional eye. "Inside, both of you. Quickly now." Once safe in his kitchen, the story poured out. The doctor listened while cleaning Lily's blistered feet, his face growing graver with each detail. "I've suspected something like this," he said finally. "Too many accidents lately. Too many people selling out and leaving town." He looked at Jonah. "You've stirred up a hornet's nest, Mr. Hayes. Pike's got half the county in his pocket." "Then we need the other half," Jonah said, starting with Sheriff Collins. "Bo's a good man, but he's one man against a machine." Doc Holcomb finished bandaging Lily's feet. "You need evidence he can't ignore. The surveying equipment I saw, it belonged to Frontier and Rail. If we could prove they're working with Pike to steal land—" "It's not enough," Lily interrupted. "We need those original tax receipts. Without them, I can't prove I don't owe the county anything. Then we need to find where they took them." Jonah moved to the window, watching the street. "Doc, can Mrs. Moreno stay here tonight?" "Of course. But where are you going?" "To have a conversation with an old acquaintance." Jonah checked his Colt. "Maddox and I have unfinished business. Maybe it's time we settled accounts." "That's suicide," Lily protested. "You can't face him alone." "I don't intend to face him at all. But men like Maddox have one weakness: they can't resist boasting about their cleverness. Get him drinking and talking, and he'll tell you everything you want to know. And if he recognizes you—" Jonah smiled grimly. "Then I'll improvise." He slipped out before either could argue further. The night wrapped around him like an old coat, familiar and concealing. This was what he'd tried to leave behind: the stalking, the hunting, the careful dance of predator and prey. But sometimes, he reflected, the past had its uses. The Broken Wheel Saloon was rowdy with cowhands spending their pay. Jonah entered through the back, keeping his hat low. Maddox held court at a corner table, regaling listeners with tales of his exploits. 3 whiskeys in and growing louder by the minute, Jonah positioned himself at the bar where he could listen without being seen. He didn't have long to wait. "Biggest score yet," Maddox was saying. "Once Pike gets that Mexican woman's land, he'll control the whole valley, and when the railroad comes through—" He made an expansive gesture. "Slopping whiskey." "What about them papers?" someone asked. "The ones you took from the house." Maddox laughed. "Safe as churches. Pike's got 'em locked in his office safe, along with half a dozen other deeds he's collected. Man's building himself an empire, and we're all gonna be rich." Jonah had heard enough. He slipped out as quietly as he'd entered, mind already working on the next problem. Pike's ranch was a fortress, his office certainly guarded, but every fortress had weak points. He just had to find them. First, though, he needed to check on Lily. The thought surprised him. When had her safety become his primary concern? He pushed the question aside. There'd be time for self-examination later. Right now, he had a job to do. As he made his way back to Doc Holcomb's, Jonah allowed himself one moment of grim satisfaction. Pike and his syndicate thought they were dealing with a helpless widow and a washed-up freight hauler. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The game was far from over. In fact, it had just begun. The north wind came early that September, carrying the bite of winter and the smell of distant snow. Jonah Hayes stood outside the sheriff's office at dawn. watching dust devils dance down Main Street. 3 days had passed since the night at Doc Holcomb's. 3 days of careful planning and cautious movement. Sheriff Beauregard Collins emerged with 2 cups of coffee, handing one to Jonah. "You sure about this?" the lawman asked. His weathered face showed every one of his 60 years, but his eyes remained sharp as a hawk's. "The evidence is solid," Jonah replied. "We've got sworn statements from the Dawsons about the late-night visits to the county office, Mabel's testimony about what she overheard, the surveying equipment with frontier and rail markings. It's still our word against Pike's, and he's got deep pockets. Then we make it about more than words." Jonah pulled out a folded paper. "This came from a friend in Denver. Frontier and Rail Syndicate has done this before in Colorado. In Kansas, same pattern. Buy out local officials. Forge documents. Force sales. They're under investigation in 3 states." Bo studied the telegram with growing interest. "This changes things. If we can prove Pike's part of a larger conspiracy, we can, but we need those original documents from his safe. Which brings us back to breaking the law to uphold it." The sheriff sighed. "I've worn this badge for 20 years. Hayes, never thought I'd see the day when I'd have to work outside it. Sometimes the law needs help being just." Their conversation was interrupted by Lily Moreno's arrival. She wore a practical riding skirt and carried herself with new determination. The past days had hardened something in her, transformed the schoolteacher into someone more formidable. "The town meeting's set for tomorrow," she announced. "Mabel's spread the word. People are angry about the fire, about the threats. They'll come." "How many?" Bo asked. "Enough. The Dawsons are bringing their neighbors, the small ranchers from Cedar Valley. Even some of Pike's own cowboys are having second thoughts." She turned to Jonah. "Any word from your contacts?" "The federal marshal in Cheyenne is interested. If we can provide proof of interstate fraud, he'll come with a full posse." "If?" Lily's jaw tightened. "Everything hinges on getting those documents." "Leave that to me." Jonah said, "You two focus on the town meeting. Keep people stirred up but not violent. We need public opinion on our side." "And if Pike strikes first?" Bo asked. "Then we'll be ready." They separated, each to their tasks. Jonah headed to the livery where Ash waited, the gray Mustang greeting him with a soft nicker. As he saddled up, Ike Dawson appeared, leading a string of horses. "Heading out to check the north pasture," Ike said, but his eyes held a question. "Mind if I ride along?" Jonah asked. "Been cooped up in town too long." They rode in companionable silence until well clear of town. Then Ike spoke. "Ruthie sent me. Said you might need an extra hand for what you're planning." "It's dangerous." "So's doing nothing." The farmer's face was grim. "Pike's men killed 2 of my milk cows last week. Said they strayed onto his land. My kids went hungry because of those cows." Jonah studied the man. Ike Dawson was built like a plow solid, dependable, unstoppable once set in motion. "Can you handle a gun?" "I'm better with a rifle than a pistol, but I hit what I aim at." "Good enough. Meet me at Cougar Rock tonight, 2 hours after sunset. Come alone and come quiet." They parted ways at the creek. Jonah spent the day scouting Pike's ranch, noting guard positions and routines. The main house sat on a rise, commanding good views in all directions, but the office was in a separate building, connected by a covered walkway, and guards, he noticed, got lazy during the dinner hour. That evening found him at Cougar Rock with Ike and an unexpected third party, Mabel Quinn herself, dressed in men's clothing and carrying an ancient shotgun. "Before you say anything," she announced, "I've got as much stake in this as anyone. That fire wasn't just about property. It was about silencing the truth, and I'll be damned if I'll be silenced by the likes of Jedediah Pike." Jonah recognized the futility of argument. "Can you ride?" "Honey, I was riding before you were born. Now, what's the plan?" He outlined his strategy. During dinner, when the guards were eating and drinking, they'd approach from 3 directions. Ike would create a distraction at the bunkhouse. Mabel would watch the horses, ready for a quick escape. Jonah would handle the office. "What about the safe?" Ike asked. "I've got some experience with safes." Jonah didn't elaborate on where that experience came from. "The real problem will be getting out if we're discovered." "Leave that to me," Mabel said. "I've got an idea." They waited for full dark, then moved into position. Pike's ranch blazed with lights, the sound of rough laughter carrying from the bunkhouse. Jonah counted guards, 2 at the main house, 1 making lazy rounds, the rest inside eating. At his signal, Ike lit a string of firecrackers and tossed them near the bunkhouse corral. The sudden explosion sent horses rearing and cowboys running. In the confusion, Jonah slipped across the yard to the office building. The door was locked, but locks had been part of his Pinkerton training. Within seconds, he was inside, moving by touch and memory toward Pike's desk. The safe stood behind it, a formidable iron box that would have deterred most thieves. But Jonah had learned safe-cracking from Gentleman Jim Hartley, the best in the business before he'd been caught and turned informant. His fingers found the dial, and he closed his eyes, letting touch and sound guide him. The mechanism was good but not exceptional. Pike had spent more on size than sophistication. Click! The first tumbler fell into place. Outside. The commotion continued. Ike was doing his job well. Click! The second tumbler. Sweat beaded on Jonah's forehead despite the cool night. Click! The third. The safe swung open. Inside, neat as a banker's drawer, lay stacks of documents. Jonah struck a match, scanning quickly. Deeds, contracts, receipts including Lily's tax papers, stamped paid in full. He grabbed everything relevant, stuffing papers into the canvas bag he'd brought. Then his eye caught something else, a leather portfolio marked Territorial Survey Confidential. Inside were maps showing mineral deposits throughout the valley, with projected values in the millions. No wonder Pike was willing to kill for this land. "That's far enough. Hayes!" Jonah froze. Cole Maddox stood in the doorway, gun drawn and smile cold. "Figured you'd try something like this. You always were predictable." "Maddox." Jonah turned slowly, hands visible. "Still doing other men's dirty work? I see. It pays well. Better than being a freight hauler." The gunman stepped closer. "You know what your problem is? Hayes. You've gone soft. The old Jonah Hayes would never have walked into such an obvious trap. The old Jonah Hayes was someone I'm trying to forget." "Pity, I liked him better." Maddox gestured with his gun. "The papers. Hand them over." Jonah reached for the bag, then paused. Through the window, he glimpsed movement. Mabel Quinn, creeping along the covered walkway with her shotgun. He needed to keep Maddox talking, keep his attention focused. "You know Pike's selling you out, right?" Jonah said conversationally. "Once the railroad comes through, he won't need guns like us anymore. He'll have lawyers and politicians." "Maybe, but that's tomorrow's problem." Maddox's eyes glittered. "Tonight's problem is you." The window exploded inward as Mabel's shotgun roared. Maddox spun, firing instinctively. Jonah dove behind the desk, drawing his Colt. When Maddox turned back, Jonah was ready. Their guns spoke simultaneously. Maddox's shot went high, splintering wood above Jonah's head. Jonah's shot was true, catching Maddox in the shoulder and spinning him around. The gunman dropped his weapon, clutching his wound. "You always were too slow on the draw," Jonah said, standing carefully. "And you always were too noble for your own good," Maddox gasped. "Pike's got 20 men. You'll never make it out alive." "We'll see." Jonah grabbed the bag of documents and headed for the window where Mabel waited. Behind them, shouts erupted as cowboys realized the office had been breached. Ike appeared with the horses, riding hard. They mounted on the run, spurring toward the darkness beyond the ranch lights. Gunfire erupted behind them, bullets whining past like angry hornets. Jonah kept low over Ash's neck, trusting the Mustang's night vision. A rider appeared from the left, gun raised. Mabel's shotgun boomed again, and the man tumbled from his saddle. "I'm getting too old for this," she shouted, but there was fierce joy in her voice. They rode hard for miles, taking a circuitous route to confuse pursuit. Finally, at a predetermined spot, they split up. Ike headed home to establish an alibi. Mabel took a back road to town. Jonah, with the precious documents, made for a line shack he'd prepared days earlier. He arrived as dawn was breaking, exhausted but triumphant. The shack held supplies for several days if needed. He unsaddled Ash and gave the horse grain and water, then settled in to examine his prize by daylight. The documents told a damning story. Not just Lily's receipts, but dozens of others. Records of bribes paid, officials bought, land seized through fraud, and the survey maps they showed deposits that would make fortunes for whoever controlled the land. Jonah was studying a particularly complex contract when hoofbeats approached. He drew his gun, then relaxed as Lily Moreno appeared, leading a pack horse. "Mabel told me where to find you," she said, dismounting. "I brought supplies and news." "What kind of news?" "Pike's in a rage. He's called in all his men, even riders from his other properties. The town meeting is this afternoon, and he's threatening to break it up." She unpacked food and medical supplies. "Sheriff Collins has deputized a dozen men, but they're mostly shopkeepers and clerks." "Then we need to move fast." Jonah showed her the documents. "This is enough to hang him, legally speaking, but we need to get it to the federal marshal." "I'll take it," Lily said immediately. "You're needed here." "It's too dangerous." "Mr. Hayes." Her voice was patient but firm. "I've been handling dangerous men since I was 16. I can ride as well as any man and shoot better than most. What I can't do is face down Pike's gunmen in a street fight. That's your skill, not mine." She was right, and he knew it. "Take the old stage road through Devil's Canyon. It's longer but less likely to be watched." "I know the route." She gathered the documents into waterproof wrapping. "Jonah." She paused, then stepped close and kissed his cheek. "Be careful. I've lost one good man to Pike's greed. I won't lose another." Before he could respond, she was mounted and gone, riding hard toward the mountains. Jonah touched his cheek where her lips had been, then shook himself. There'd be time for such thoughts later, if there was a later. He saddled Ash and headed for town, arriving to find Main Street crowded with wagons and horses. The town meeting had drawn everyone: ranchers, farmers, townspeople, even some of Pike's own cowboys who'd grown uncomfortable with their employer's methods. Sheriff Collins met him outside the church where the meeting would be held. "Pike's men are gathering at the Broken Wheel," he reported. "Maybe 30 of them, all armed." "And our side?" "About the same, but half couldn't hit a barn from inside it." Bo's smile was grim. "This could go bad fast." "Hayes." "Then we'd better make sure it doesn't." Inside the church, voices rose in angry discussion. Mabel Quinn held court near the pulpit, testimonies in hand. The Dawsons and their neighbors clustered together, faces set with determination. Even Doc Holcomb was there, medical bag at his feet in grim expectation of need. When Jonah entered, conversation stopped. He walked to the front, very aware of all eyes on him. "Most of you know me as a freight hauler," he began. "Some know I used to be something else. What matters now is that we all know the truth. Pike and his syndicate are stealing what you've worked for. The question is, what are we going to do about it?" "We can't fight his guns," someone called out. "No," Jonah agreed. "But we can stand up to them. We can refuse to be driven off. We can bear witness to the truth until help arrives." "What help?" another voice demanded. "Federal marshals are coming. Mrs. Moreno is riding to meet them now with proof of Pike's crimes." He held up his hands against the surge of voices. "But they won't be here until tomorrow at the earliest. We need to hold out until then." The church door slammed open. Cyrus Whitman stood there, Pike visible behind him. "This is an illegal assembly," Whitman announced. "By order of Mr. Pike, the county magistrate. You're all commanded to disperse." "Pike's no magistrate," Sheriff Collins said, standing. "And this is a lawful gathering of citizens." "We'll see about that." Pike pushed forward, his men spreading out behind him. "You people have been stirring up trouble, making false accusations. It ends now."
"The only thing ending is your reign of theft," Mabel said loudly. "We've got witnesses, Pike, documents. The whole story's going to the territorial governor."
Pike's face darkened. "You meddling old—" The sound of Jonah cocking his Colt was very loud in the sudden silence. "Choose your next words carefully. Mr. Pike." The two men locked eyes. Around them, hands drifted toward weapons. The church balanced on a knife's edge of violence. Then, unexpectedly, one of Pike's own cowboys spoke up. "This ain't right, boss. Threatening folks in a church. I didn't sign on for this."
"Shut your mouth, Henley!"
Whitman snarled. "No." The cowboy, barely 20, with an honest face, stepped away from Pike's group. "My ma didn't raise me to bully women and farmers. I quit." Others stirred uneasily. Pike had pushed too hard, too fast. The facade of legality he'd maintained was crumbling. "Anyone who walks out now can ride away clean," Sheriff Collins announced. "Stay, and you'll be accessories to fraud and attempted murder." 5 more cowboys departed, then 3 more. Pike's force was diminishing, but those who remained were the hardest cases, men who'd chosen their side long ago. "Get out," Pike said, his voice deadly quiet. "All of you, get out of my town." "Your town," Jonah laughed, a sound without humor. "This town belongs to the people who built it, who work its stores and teach its children and tend its sick. You're just a parasite, Pike, and parasites can be removed." Pike's hand moved toward his gun. Jonah was faster. His Colt centered on Pike's chest before the man's hand touched leather. "Don't," Jonah said quietly. "Just don't." The standoff stretched taut. Then Pike smiled, a cold expression that never reached his eyes. "This isn't over, Hayes, not by a long shot." He turned and walked out, his remaining men following. The church erupted in nervous celebration, but Jonah remained watchful. Pike was right, this wasn't over. It was just beginning. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, matching the mood of the town. The battle lines were drawn. Now all they had to do was survive until help arrived. If help arrived, if Lily made it through. Too many ifs, Jonah thought. But then, life on the frontier had always been about facing uncertain odds with whatever courage you could muster. He touched the spot where Lily had kissed him, drew strength from the memory, and prepared for whatever came next. The storm was coming, in more ways than one. The wanted poster appeared on the sheriff's office wall at dawn. Jonah's face staring back from a rough sketch that captured enough of his features to be dangerous. Wanted for theft of private property and assault. Jonah Hayes, $500 reward. Sheriff Collins tore it down with disgust. "Pike's getting desperate, putting bounties on law-abiding citizens." "$500 is a lot of money," Jonah observed, studying the poster. "Enough to tempt even honest men." "Let them try," Mabel Quinn said, having appeared with her morning coffee rounds. "Half this town would stand between you and any bounty hunter fool enough to show his face." But Jonah knew better. Money had a way of changing loyalties, and Pike's gold ran deep. He made his decision quickly. "I'm turning myself in." "Have you lost your mind?" Mabel nearly dropped her coffee pot. "Think about it," Jonah said calmly. "If I'm in custody, Pike has to follow legal procedures. It forces him into the open, makes him play by rules he's been avoiding, and it keeps Maddox and his guns focused on me instead of terrorizing the town." Sheriff Collins frowned thoughtfully. "It's risky. Once you're in custody, I can only protect you so much. I'm counting on Pike's arrogance. He'll want to transport me himself, make a show of it. That's when he'll be vulnerable. Jonah turned to Mabel. How long until Mrs.
Moreno returns with the federal marshals.
2 days, maybe 3 if the weather turns. Then we need to buy those days. Jonah unbuckled his gun belt, handing it to the sheriff. Book me for the theft. Make it official. Within an hour, news of Jonah's arrest had spread through Sagebrush Flats like wildfire. Pike arrived at the jail with Maddox and 6 men, the gunslinger's arm in a sling from their previous encounter, but his eyes sharp with anticipated revenge. Well, well, Pike said, surveying Jonah through the cell bars. The mighty Pinkerton, caged at last. Not so dangerous now, are you? Jonah remained seated on the narrow cot, projecting calm. I'm just a freight hauler. Pike, your poster says so. Don't play games with me. Hayes, you stole valuable documents from my office? Where are they? I don't know what you're talking about. Pike's face flushed. Those papers are mine by right. They prove my legal claims to half this valley. Funny how legal claims need to be stolen back. Sheriff Collins observed from his desk. Almost like they weren't legal to begin with. You're walking a thin line, Sheriff, Pike warned. Your badge won't protect you forever. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Pike turned back to Jonah. I'm taking custody of the prisoner. Territorial judge in Cedar Falls wants to see him. That's a day's ride through rough country. Collins protested. Procedure says, I make the procedures now. Pike snapped. Have him ready to travel at first light. After Pike left, Jonah and the sheriff exchanged glances. Cedar Falls was perfect isolated, far from help, with a dozen places for an accident to occur along the trail. I can't let you go, Collins said quietly. It's a death sentence. You don't have a choice, but you can make sure the town knows exactly when and where I'm being taken. Jonah smiled grimly. Pike's not the only one who can set a trap. That evening, as shadows lengthened across the jail, an unexpected visitor arrived. Ruthie Dawson, Ike's wife, carried a covered basket that smelled of fresh bread and stew. Figured you might be hungry, she said, but her eyes held a different message. As Collins checked the food standard procedure, Ruthie leaned close to the bars. Ike's gathering the men. We won't let them take you. No, Jonah said firmly. No bloodshed. That's what Pike wants an excuse to call in the cavalry and declare martial law. Tell Ike to wait, watch, and be ready. But no shooting unless I signal. And how will you signal with your hands in irons? Jonah just smiled. I'll manage. Night fell with a tension that seemed to press against the windows. Jonah lay on his cot, running through possibilities. When he heard it, the soft scrape of metal on metal. Someone was working on the back door of the jail. He rolled silently to his feet, ready for whatever came through that door. But instead of Pike's men, a familiar figure slipped inside. Lily Moreno, dressed in men's clothing, her face smudged with dirt from hard riding. What are you doing here? Jonah whispered urgently. You're supposed to be... I delivered the documents to Marshal Titus. He's gathering a posse, but it'll take time. She produced a set of lockpicks. We're getting you out. No, if I run, it proves Pike's accusations. We need you alive, Lily interrupted, working on his cell door with surprising expertise. I found Miguel's journal hidden in the ranch house. He documented everything Pike's threats, the mineral surveys, even a conversation where Pike admitted to planning to remove obstacles. You were right. They killed him. The lock clicked open. Jonah stepped out, then gently closed the door again. I'm sorry about Miguel, but I can't run. Not now. Jonah Hayes, you are the most frustratingly noble. Lily's tirade was cut short by Sheriff Collins entering from the front office. Thought I heard voices, he said mildly, taking in the scene. Mrs. Moreno. Those lockpicks wouldn't happen to be the ones that went missing from my desk drawer last month. I couldn't say, Sheriff. Collins sighed. Get in the cell with him, both of you, now. Confused but trusting, They complied. The sheriff locked the door and pocketed the key. Pike's men are watching the jail. If they see you here, Mrs. Moreno, they'll know you're back. This way. You're just another prisoner. But morning transport will be interesting, Collins continued, returning to his desk. Shame I'll have to take both prisoners. Safety in numbers and all that. Understanding dawned. Jonah gripped Lily's hand through the bars separating the men's and women's cells. You brilliant old fox! I've been sheriffing longer than you've been alive. Son, now get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Dawn came pale and dusty, the sky promising another scorcher. Pike arrived with a dozen men, including Maddox, whose cold eyes promised retribution. When he saw Lily in the adjacent cell, his face darkened. What's she doing here? Caught her trying to break Hayes out. Collins replied smoothly. Figured you'd want her transported too, aiding a criminal and all. Pike's smile was predatory. Perfect. Save me the trouble of tracking her down later. He gestured to his men. Load them up. They used a prison wagon, iron reinforced with tiny barred windows. Jonah and Lily were shackled hand and foot, the chains heavy enough to prevent any thought of escape. As they were loaded in, Jonah caught glimpses of townspeople gathering Mabel, the Dawsons, Doc Holcomb, others, watching, waiting. The convoy moved out slowly. Pike rode in front with Maddox, the prison wagon in the middle. 6 armed riders bringing up the rear. They took the north road out of town, heading toward the badlands that separated Sagebrush Flats from Cedar Falls. Talkative this morning. Hayes, Maddox called back, his voice mocking. No clever words, no Pinkerton tricks. Jonah remained silent, but his eyes tracked their route. They were approaching Skeleton Ridge, where the road narrowed between high rocks, perfect ambush country. If Ike Dawson had understood his cryptic message. You know, Pike said conversationally. It's a shame about accidents on these mountain roads. Wagons go over cliffs all the time. Terrible tragedies. Especially when the bodies are found full of bullet holes, Lily observed acidly. Pike laughed. Who said anything about bodies being found? They reached the narrow part of the trail. Cliff on one side, drop on the other. Jonah tensed. This would be the place. He caught Lily's eye, mouthed, "Be ready," and began working on the shackles. Ruthie Dawson's visit hadn't just brought food, she'd also delivered a small piece of bent metal, perfect for lockpicking, baked into the bread. The first shot came from above, striking the ground just in front of Pike's horse. The animal reared, nearly throwing him. More shots followed, precisely placed to create chaos without hitting anyone. Ambush, Maddox shouted, drawing his gun with his good arm. Circle the wagon! But there was nowhere to circle in the narrow pass. Pike's men fired blindly at the rocks above while their horses danced nervously on the precipice. In the confusion, no one noticed Jonah slip his shackles and start on Lily's. It's those farmers, Pike raged. I'll hang every one of them. A familiar voice echoed from the rocks. Let the prisoners go. Pike, this ends now. Ike Dawson, good man. You think a bunch of sodbusters can stop me? Pike wheeled his horse, face purple with rage. Maddox, take the wagon through, I'll deal with these fools. But Maddox had problems of his own. His horse, already skittish from his rider's awkward one-armed grip, lost its footing on the loose shale. For a moment, horse and rider teetered on the edge. Then, with a scream from the horse and a curse from Maddox, they went over. The gunfire stopped. Everyone stared at the spot where one of the deadliest guns in the territory had just vanished. Then Pike's voice, cold and controlled. Get that wagon moving, now! The driver whipped the horses forward. Jonah finished freeing Lily and kicked open the wagon's rear door just as they cleared the narrows. He pulled Lily with him as they jumped, hitting the ground hard and rolling. Shouts erupted behind them. Jonah grabbed Lily's hand and ran for the rocks where Ike's men were hidden. Bullets whined past. Kicking up dust, they scrambled up the slope. Lily's skirts tearing on the rough stone. "About time," Ike Dawson greeted them, rifle in hand. "Thought you were going to ride all the way to Cedar Falls." "Where's Sheriff Collins?" Jonah asked, accepting a spare rifle from one of the farmers. "Back in town with Mabel and the others. They're fortifying Main Street in case Pike doubles back." Which he would. Jonah knew. Pike's careful plans had unraveled, and cornered men did desperate things. "We need to get back." Jonah decided. "Pike will." A rumble from above cut him off. Rocks cascaded down the slope. Someone had triggered a landslide. Jonah pushed Lily behind a boulder as stones rained down. When the dust cleared, the pass was blocked by tons of rubble. "That wasn't us," Ike said, bewildered. A figure emerged from higher up the slope, one of Pike's own cowboys, the young one who'd walked out of the church, Henley. "Figured you might need help," he called down. "Pike's gone too far. Most of the boys know it, even if they're too scared to say." "Which way did Pike go?" Jonah asked. "Back to town. He's planning to ford up at the Broken Wheel, wait for reinforcements from his other properties." Henley climbed down to join them. "But you've got maybe 20 men on your side now. Some of us are tired of being on the wrong side of this fight." They made their way back to Sagebrush Flats by secondary trails, gathering more supporters along the way. Word had spread through the valley Pike's reign of intimidation was cracking. They found the town in a state of siege. Pike's remaining men had indeed taken over the Broken Wheel Saloon. While the townspeople had barricaded Main Street, it was a standoff, with women and children huddled in the church and armed men watching from windows and rooftops. Sheriff Collins met them at the barricade. "Glad you made it. Pike's demanding you two be turned over. Says he'll burn the town otherwise." "He'll burn it anyway." Lily said, "He can't afford witnesses now." "Then we'd better end this before he gets the chance." Jonah surveyed the situation with a tactical eye. "How many men does he have?" "Maybe 15 in the saloon, but they're the hard cases, the killers." "And our side?" 30, maybe 35, but half are shopkeepers and farmers." "Sometimes that's enough." Jonah turned to Henley. "You said some of Pike's men are having second thoughts. Can you reach them?" "Maybe. There's a back entrance to the saloon through the old brewery. I could try talking to them." "Do it. Tell them Sheriff Collins is offering amnesty to anyone who stands down. This is Pike's fight, not theirs." As Henley slipped away, Jonah organized their defenses. The farmers might not be gunfighters, but they knew how to shoot, and they were defending their homes. That counted for something. The afternoon wore on in tense silence. Then, as the sun began its descent toward the mountains, Pike appeared on the saloon's balcony. "You've got 1 hour," he shouted. "Turn over Hayes and the woman, or we start burning buildings, your choice." "Here's our choice." "Pike." Mabel Quinn's voice rang out from the hotel. "You and your killers get out of our town. The federal marshals are on their way. And you'll hang for what you've done." Pike's laugh was ugly. "Old woman, when I'm done here, there won't be enough of this town left for the marshals to find." But his bravado rang hollow, even from across the street. Jonah could see the uncertainty in Pike's movements. The man had built his empire on intimidation and legal manipulation. Now, faced with open resistance, he was floundering. A commotion inside the saloon drew Pike back inside. Minutes later, 5 of his men emerged. Hands raised. Henley had done his work well. "That's it, Pike," Sheriff Collins called. "You're running out of men in time. Surrender now, and you'll live to see trial." The answer came in gunfire. Shattering windows along Main Street, the battle for Sagebrush Flats had begun. But it was a strange battle, fought as much with words as bullets. Every time Pike's men fired, voices called out from the buildings, friends, neighbors, people they knew. "Tom Garrett, your sister's watching from the church. Bill Murphy, you taught my boy to ride. This ain't your fight." One by one, Pike's men began to slip away. As darkness fell, only a handful remained. Pike himself had gone silent. no longer appearing at the windows.
Something's wrong, Jonah muttered. He's too quiet.
His instincts proved right. A glow appeared in the saloon window's fire. Pike was going to burn his way out, taking half the town with him. He's lost his mind. Collins breathed. If that fire spreads, Jonah made his decision. I'm going in.
That's suicide,
Lily protested, gripping his arm. Maybe, but I know Pike. He's got an escape plan. Probably horses in the back alley, money stashed somewhere. If he gets away now, he'll be back with an army.
Then I'm coming with you.
No. He touched her face gently. This is something I have to finish. The man I used to be, he would have shot Pike down without thought. I need to prove I'm not that man anymore. By walking into a burning building, by giving even Jedediah Pike a chance to surrender. Before she could argue further, he was gone, sprinting across the street. No shots came. Pike's men were too busy fleeing the growing fire. Jonah kicked in the saloon's door and plunged into smoke and heat. He found Pike in his office behind the bar, frantically stuffing money and documents into saddlebags. The man looked up, saw Jonah, and reached for his gun.
Don't,
Jonah said quietly.
It's over. Pike, your men are gone. The marshals are coming. You've lost.
I never lose, Pike snarled.
I've got money, influence.
You've got nothing. The documents you're trying to save. We have copies. The officials you bribed. They're talking. Your empire is ashes, just like this building will be. Fire crackled around them, smoke thickening. Pike's eyes darted between Jonah and the back door. You can come with me and live. Jonah offered, or you can die here. Choose. For a moment, Pike wavered. Then his face twisted with fury.
I'll see you in hell first.
He drew, or tried to, but age and smoke and desperation made him slow. Jonah's hand moved with the speed of long practice, his gun clearing leather and firing in one smooth motion. Pike spun and fell, his shot going wild. Jonah knelt beside him. Pike was still alive, but not for long.
You shot me,
he gasped, disbelieving. I gave you a choice. Jonah said, You made it. Pike's eyes blazed with hatred even as life fled them. Should have killed you when I had the chance. Yes, Jonah agreed quietly. You should have. Pike's breath rattled out. Jonah closed the man's eyes, then grabbed the saddlebag's evidence that would be needed. The fire was spreading fast now. He ran for the back door, burst through into blessed cool air, and found himself face to face with Lily Moreno. I told you to stay. She silenced him with a fierce kiss.
Don't ever do that again.
Which part, the heroics or the leaving you behind? Both. They made their way back to Main Street where bucket brigades were already forming. The saloon was lost, but they saved the surrounding buildings. As dawn broke over Sagebrush Flats, exhausted townspeople surveyed the damage. It could have been worse. It could have been so much worse. Look, someone called, pointing to the road. A dust cloud approached riders, lots of them. For a moment, fear returned. Then they saw the badges glinting in the morning sun. The federal marshals had arrived. Marshal Titus, a grizzled veteran with eyes like flint, surveyed the scene with professional interest. Looks like you folks started the party without us. Just keeping things interesting, Sheriff Collins replied, though I think we're all ready for some boring days ahead. As statements were taken and evidence collected, Jonah found himself standing with Lily by the ruins of the saloon. The danger had passed, but questions remained. Where did they go from here? You know, Lily said thoughtfully. I've been thinking about Miguel's dream, the ranch. I mean, it's too much for one person. But with help. What kind of help? Oh, someone who knows horses, someone good with his hands, someone who's proven he'll stand by me when things get hard. Jonah smiled. Sounds like a tall order. Where would you find someone like that? I might have someone in mind. She looked up at him. If he's interested, he might be, though he'd probably insist on making it official first. Proper-like. Is that a proposal, Mr. Hayes? It's a statement of intent, Mrs. Moreno. The proposal will come when I can do it right, when I'm not covered in soot and smelling like smoke. She laughed, the sound bright as morning. I'll hold you to that. As the sun climbed higher, painting the mountains gold, Jonah felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. The past wasn't erased, it never could be. But maybe, just maybe, it could be redeemed. The fight for Sagebrush Flats was over. The fight for the future had just begun. The storm came from nowhere, as autumn storms often did in Wyoming territory. One moment Jonah and Lily were riding back from town with supplies. The next they were fighting through horizontal snow and winds that threatened to tear them from their saddles. "There!" Jonah shouted over the howling wind, pointing to a dark shape ahead. The old storage shed at Willow Creek Ranch materialized through the white curtain, not much, but enough. They fought their way inside, horses and all. The structure groaned under the wind's assault but held firm. Miguel Moreno had built well, even for something as simple as a storage shed. "So much for an easy supply run," Lily said, teeth chattering as she struggled with frozen buckles on the pack saddle. "Here." Jonah's hands covered hers, working the leather free. "Get out of those wet clothes before you freeze." "Ever the gentleman, Mr. Hayes, turning your back. Ever the practical man, Mrs. Moreno. There's canvas in the corner and my duster's mostly dry. Pneumonia's no joke out here." They worked in efficient silence, hanging wet clothes on nails, rubbing down the horses, making the small space as comfortable as possible. Jonah found an old lantern with some oil still in it, and soon a warm glow pushed back the darkness. "Look at this," Lily said, brushing dust from a wooden crate. "Miguel's tools. He was going to expand this place, make it a proper barn." The shed was full of such remnants, half-finished projects, dreams interrupted. Jonah watched Lily trace her fingers over her late husband's plans, penciled on the wall. "You miss him," he said quietly. "Every day, but differently now." She turned to face him. "Is that terrible? That I can stand here with you and not feel guilty anymore?" "I think Miguel would want you to be happy." "He would. He was generous that way." She moved closer to the lantern. "To him. Tell me something. Jonah, in all your traveling, all your previous work, did you ever think you'd end up here? In a shed in Wyoming, can't say it was part of the plan." "You know what I mean." He did know. The past week since Pike's defeat had been a revelation. Days spent working together to restore the ranch, evenings on the porch watching the sun paint the mountains. Quiet moments like this where words weren't necessary. "No," he admitted. "I thought I'd die alone somewhere. Probably violent, probably young. Seemed like justice for the things I'd done." "What changed?" "You." The word slipped out before he could stop it. "This place. The people. Mabel bringing pies. Ike helping with the fences. Even Sheriff Collins stopping by to check on things. I never had that before. Community. Purpose beyond the next job." The wind howled louder, rattling the walls. Lily shivered despite the canvas wrapped around her shoulders. Without thinking, Jonah opened his arms, and she stepped into them. It felt natural, right, like pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together. "I was so angry when Miguel died," she murmured against his chest. "Angry at Pike, at God, at Miguel for leaving me alone, but mostly angry at myself for not being enough to save him. You can't save everyone. Lily, I learned that the hard way." "Tell me." Jonah was quiet for a long moment, holding her while the storm raged outside. "There was a family in Kansas, settlers, caught in a range war. I was hired to protect them, but I was also tracking the men threatening them, wanted criminals with bounties on their heads. I got too focused on the hunt, on the money. Left them alone one night to pursue a lead. His voice roughened.
Came back to ashes. 2 kids among the dead. If I'd stayed.
You don't know that. You might have died with them. Maybe. But at least I would have tried. Instead, I collected those bounties and told myself justice was served. Took me another year to realize justice and revenge aren't the same thing. He pulled back to look at her. That's why I quit. Why I came here, looking for a place where the past couldn't find me. But it did find you. Through Pike, through Maddox. Yes, and I'm almost grateful, because fighting Pike the right way, with the law and the community, it showed me I could change, that the skills I'd learned didn't have to be used for violence. Lily reached up, touching the scar on his shoulder through his shirt.
This is from Maddox.
First time we met, I was tracking him. He was tracking the same bounty. Neither of us was willing to share. Who won? Nobody. We shot each other up pretty good. Bounty got away. Should have learned then that violence just breeds more violence. You've learned now. That's what matters. The lantern flickered, casting dancing shadows. Outside, the storm seemed to be easing slightly, though snow still fell thick and fast. They'd be here for hours yet. I should check the horses, Jonah said, but made no move to leave her arms. They're fine. Ash would let you know if they weren't. True enough. The gray Mustang had become as protective of Lily as he was of Jonah, a development that still surprised them both. Lily! Jonah started, then stopped. The words he wanted to say seemed too big for the small space, too important for a shed in a storm. But she knew. She always seemed to know what he was thinking. Ask me, she said softly. Here now. Where better this is our land, our life. Not fancy, not perfect, but real. He looked around the humble shelter at the tools waiting to build dreams, at the woman who'd already rebuilt his heart, and knew she was right. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. It's not much, he said, revealing a simple gold band. Bought it weeks ago, but couldn't find the right moment. Where did you? She stopped, recognizing it. That's the ring from Mrs. Patterson's estate sale, the one I admired. Mabel may have mentioned you liked it. That wonderful meddling woman. Lily's eyes shone with tears and laughter. How long has she been conspiring? Since approximately 5 minutes after I pulled you from that fire. He took her hand, the ring poised at her fingertip. Lily Moreno, you've already saved me in every way that matters. Would you do me the honor of— Yes, she didn't let him finish. Yes to all of it. To the ranch, to the dreams, to the life we'll build. Yes, Jonah Hayes. He slipped the ring on her finger, a perfect fit. They stood there, foreheads touching, breathing the same air, while the storm wrapped them in a cocoon of white silence. What happens now? Lily whispered, echoing thoughts from that dangerous time when everything hung in the balance. Jonah smiled, remembering her fierce courage, her unwavering faith in him even when he'd had none in himself. He reached up, slowly unbuttoning his shirt where she could see the scars that mapped his past, each one a story, a lesson, a step on the road that led to her. Anything you dream of, he said, meaning it. We've got land, we've got plans, we've got each other. The rest we'll figure out as we go. She smiled shyly, an expression he'd rarely seen on her usually confident face. It made her look younger, softer, like the girl she might have been before life demanded she become so strong. I dream of spring mornings on the porch, she said. Coffee and quiet talk. I dream of a garden where the old corral was. Flowers mixed with vegetables because beauty and practicality should go hand in hand. I can build you a garden. I dream of horses in the pasture, maybe cattle eventually, a real working ranch. Not just surviving, but thriving. We'll make it happen. I dream of children. Her voice dropped lower. Laughter in these rooms, little feet on these floors, teaching them to read under that big cottonwood, watching them grow strong and free. Lily, his voice caught. I dream of growing old with you, Jonah, of sitting on that porch 50 years from now, watching sunsets and remembering this moment, this storm, this shed, this beginning. He kissed her then, pouring all his hopes and promises into the connection. When they finally parted, both were breathless.
Your turn,
she said.
What do you dream?
Simple things, he admitted. Waking up beside you, working this land until it blooms, being part of the town instead of just passing through, maybe wearing a deputy's badge when Collins finally retires, using my skills to protect instead of hunt. Sheriff Hayes has a nice ring to it. Let's start with husband and work our way up. They talked through the night as the storm gradually spent itself. Plans for the ranch, for their wedding, for the life stretching ahead. By dawn, the sky had cleared to crystal blue, and the world lay buried under 2 feet of pristine snow. It's beautiful, Lily breathed as they led the horses out. Like a fresh start, Jonah agreed.
Everything covered clean and new.
They mounted up for the final stretch home, but Lily paused, looking back at the shed. We should preserve this place, add it to the ranch, but keep it as it is. A reminder.
Of what?
That sometimes the best things come from unexpected storms. They rode home through the glittering morning, their horses breaking trail through the virgin snow. Smoke rose from the chimney. Ike must have come by to tend the fire. Good neighbor that he was. The house waited, sturdy and welcoming, ready to shelter new dreams. As they dismounted, Ash nudged Jonah's shoulder, then, surprisingly, did the same to Lily, the gray Mustang's seal of approval on their union.
Even your horse knows.
Lily laughed. He's got good instincts. They stood together on the porch, looking out over their snow-covered domain. The mountains rose majestic in the distance. The cottonwoods by the creek stood bare, but patient for spring. Everything waited, full of potential.
No regrets?
Lily asked. Only one, Jonah said.
That it took me so long to find you. You found me exactly when you were supposed to, when we were both ready.
She leaned into him.
Miguel used to say that God's timing is perfect, even when we don't understand it.
I'm beginning to think he was right. To Miguel, then, Jonah said, raising an imaginary glass. For building strong shelters and loving well.
To Miguel,
Lily agreed.
And to us, for having the courage to use them.
They went inside to warmth and coffee, and the beginning of their shared life. Outside. The sun climbed higher, setting the snow to sparkling like scattered diamonds.
A new day in Wyoming territory, full of promise and possibility.
In his pocket, Jonah's leather notebook held one final entry.
Found what I wasn't looking for. Home, purpose, love.
The past is still there. Probably always will be. But it doesn't own me anymore.
Today I start building instead of running. Today I choose hope.
And her, always her. The storm had passed, leaving everything transformed in its wake. And in a humble storage shed, 2 lonely souls had found their way to each other, proving that sometimes the greatest treasures are discovered in the most unexpected places. Spring would come, as it always did. But for now, winter held them gentle, a season of quiet preparation for all the life to come. The October sun beat down on the railroad depot's makeshift courtyard, where Sheriff Collins had organized the town meeting. Every soul in Sagebrush Flats seemed to be there: ranchers, farmers, shopkeepers, even the saloon girls from the Red Dog, Pike's former establishment now under new management.
Order!
Sheriff Collins called out, though his voice carried little authority over the angry murmur of the crowd.
I said order!
Jonah stood near the front with Lily, watching the sheriff try to maintain control. 3 weeks had passed since their engagement in the storm. 3 weeks of relative peace. But today, that peace shattered like glass under a hammer. Across the courtyard, the remnants of Pike's empire had gathered. His lawyers from Denver, representatives from Frontier and Rail Syndicate, and most troubling, Cole Maddox alive despite his fall, arms still bound but eyes sharp with malice.
This is a kangaroo court, declared Augustus Weatherby.
Pike's lead attorney, a man who looked like he'd been carved from soap and dressed in Eastern finery. My clients have legitimate claims to the properties in question. Your client is dead. Mabel Quinn shot back from the crowd.
Pike can't own nothing from the grave.
The corporation survives the man, Weatherby replied smoothly. All contracts signed by Jedediah Pike remain binding on his estate and partners. Contracts signed under duress ain't worth the paper they're written on. Ike Dawson called out. The crowd rumbled agreement, but Weatherby merely smiled. Prove it. And there was the crux. While they had evidence of Pike's schemes, many of the intimidated sellers had fled the territory. Fear had scattered witnesses to the wind. Furthermore, Weatherby continued, producing a leather portfolio. I have here mining assessments showing significant mineral deposits throughout this valley. My clients have legal claim to these resources based on prior agreements. Agreements with who? Sheriff Collins demanded. With the territorial government. Weatherby's smile widened. Signed and sealed before any of your recent unpleasantness. Lily's hand tightened on Jonah's arm. They both knew what this meant. Even with Pike dead, his syndicate could strip the valley bare, force out every family through legal manipulation. I'd like to see those assessments. A new voice called out. Everyone turned as a distinguished man in a federal marshal's uniform stepped forward. Marshal Titus had stayed in town after Pike's death, officially to oversee the investigation, but Jonah suspected he'd grown fond of Mabel's cooking. Weatherby hesitated. These are proprietary documents. Not anymore. Titus held out his hand. Federal investigation takes precedence over corporate privacy. The documents. Counselor. As Weatherby reluctantly handed over the portfolio, Maddox pushed forward. While we're talking about legal matters, I've got one of my own. His good hand produced a warrant. Jonah Hayes is wanted in Kansas for murder. I'm claiming the bounty. The crowd gasped. Lily stepped forward, but Jonah held her back. That warrant's 3 years old, Sheriff Collins said, examining it. And it says questioning in connection with, not wanted for. Same difference, Maddox snarled. Hayes killed the Bracken family, shot them down in cold blood. I was there. Liar. The word tore from Jonah's throat before he could stop it. You were there all right with the gang that killed them. I saw you riding away. Prove it, Maddox echoed Weatherby's earlier challenge. Your word against mine, and you're the one who collected bounties on the Bracken gang 2 days later. Mighty convenient, them being dead and unable to dispute your version. Jonah felt the crowd's eyes on him, felt their doubt creeping in like poison. This was Pike's final gambit, destroy the opposition's credibility, turn the town against its defenders. I've heard enough, Marshal Titus announced. This matter will be settled properly. Mr. Hayes, you'll remain in town while I telegraph Kansas for details. Mr. Maddox, you'll do the same. Any man who tries to leave will be considered a fugitive. What about the land claims? Someone shouted. Court will reconvene tomorrow. Sheriff Collins decided. Folks need time to review these new documents. As the crowd dispersed, Jonah found himself surrounded by questioning looks. Some supportive, others suspicious. The seed of doubt had been planted. That evening, in the kitchen of the ranch house, Lily paced while Jonah sat at the table, staring at his coffee. It's a lie, she said for the 10th time. Everyone knows you wouldn't say. Do they? Jonah interrupted. They know me as a freight hauler who used to be a Pinkerton, that's all. And Pinkertons, we didn't always have the best reputation. Stop it, she whirled to face him. I know you. Mabel knows you. Ike, Sheriff Collins. But will that be enough in a court of law? With Maddox testifying, he rubbed his face. Maybe I should leave. Take the doubt with me. The slap came so fast he didn't see it coming. His cheek stung as Lily glared at him, eyes blazing. Don't you dare, she said, voice low and dangerous. Don't you dare run now.
We've come too far, fought too hard. You promised me dreams. Jonah Hayes, was that a lie too?
No. He caught her hand, held it to his reddened cheek. No, it wasn't. I'm sorry, You're scared, I understand, but running proves guilt. Staying and fighting proves character. She softened, cupping his face. Tomorrow, we show them who you really are. That night, as they lay together in the parlor where propriety demanded they remain until wedding vows were spoken, Jonah told her the whole story. The Bracken family father, mother, 2 daughters aged 12 and 14. How he'd been hired to protect them, but also hunting their tormentors. How he'd made the fatal choice to pursue rather than protect. I found them 2 hours after Maddox and his gang left, he said quietly. The girls, they fought. You could see it in the signs. They fought so hard. Lily held him as he wept, years of guilt finally breaking free.
It wasn't your fault, she whispered. You couldn't have known.
I should have stayed, should have chosen protection over profit. And you've been punishing yourself ever since. She pulled back to look at him.
Jonah, those killers, did you bring them to justice?
Every last one. Took me 2 days to track them down.
Then you avenged that family. It doesn't bring them back, but you did what you could. She kissed his forehead. Tomorrow, we'll make the town see that.
Morning came too soon. The courtyard filled again, but now there were federal soldiers from Fort Laramie, summoned by Marshal Titus. The territorial governor himself had arrived on the dawn train, turning a town dispute into a territory-wide concern. Weatherby opened with corporate precision, laying out charts and contracts, building a case that would strip the valley bare within the letter of the law. Maddox sat beside him, smirking whenever he caught Jonah's eye. Then Sheriff Collins called the first witness.
Henrietta Patterson, please take the stand.
The elderly widow who'd sold Lily's engagement ring climbed carefully to the witness chair.
I've lived in this valley 40 years,
she began, voice clear despite her age. I knew Jedediah Pike when he was just an ambitious young man. Watched him change, watched him grow cold. Objection. Weatherby called. Character testimony is not overruled. The governor said mildly. Continue. Mrs. Patterson. Pike tried to buy my land 5 times. Each time I refused. Something bad would happen. Cattle died. Fences cut. My grandson's dog shot on my very porch. Her eyes hardened.
The last time, Pike himself came. Said accidents happen to old women living alone.
That's when I sold. One by one, others testified. Some had fled but returned for the trial. Each story built the picture systematic intimidation, threats, violence always implied but rarely proven. Then came Jonah's turn.
State your name for the record.
Jonah Hayes. Mr. Hayes. Weatherby began smoothly.
Is it true you were a Pinkerton detective?
Yes.
Is it true you collected bounties on wanted men?
Yes. Is it true that on April 15th, 1886, you collected $500 each for the bodies of Frank Bracken, Tom Bracken, and William Slade? Yes. And is it true that 2 days prior, the Bracken family, different Brackens, were murdered at their homestead? Jonah met Maddox's eyes across the courtyard. Yes.
Then let me pose a theory,
Weatherby said, warming to his theme.
You were tracking these outlaws. You knew they planned to raid the homestead. Instead of warning the family, you let the raid happen, then tracked and killed the raiders for the bounty. $500 per man is quite a profit for 2 days' work.
The crowd murmured. Jonah felt their doubt growing.
That's not what happened, he said steadily.
Then what did happen, Mr. Hayes? Jonah took a breath. I was hired to protect the Bracken family. But I'd also been tracking the gang for weeks. When I got word they were moving, I made a choice. I thought I could intercept them before they reached the homestead. I was wrong.
So you abandoned the family you were paid to protect?
I made a tactical error. I've regretted it every day since. Regret doesn't bring back the dead, does it? Weatherby turned to the crowd. This is the man you've chosen as your champion, a bounty hunter who put profit over people. That's enough. A new voice rang out. A woman pushed through the crowd, young, perhaps 25, with auburn hair and a determined expression. I've heard enough lies. Who are you? The governor demanded.
Sarah Bracken McAllister. I was Sarah Bracken then.
She looked at Jonah with tears in her eyes.
I was the eldest daughter, and I'm alive because of this man.
Stunned silence greeted her words. Even Maddox looked shaken. But the reports said, Weatherby began. The reports were wrong. Sarah climbed to the witness area. Mr. Hayes told us to hide in the root cellar if trouble came, made us practice until we could do it in seconds. When the raiders came, my sister Emma and I made it to the cellar. Our parents and younger sisters, they didn't. She turned to the crowd.
We heard it all.
Heard Maddox laughing as they heard our family. Heard him say they should search for more children. But the others were eager to leave, and they did. You're saying Cole Maddox was with the raiders? I'm saying he led them. Her voice rang with conviction.
Emma and I stayed hidden for hours, terrified. Then Mr. Hayes arrived. He found us, got us to safety, then went after the killers. Every last one.
Where's your sister now? Marshal Titus asked gently.
Died of fever 2 years later, but she lived 2 years longer because of him.
Sarah faced Jonah directly.
I've wanted to thank you for so long. You saved us, then disappeared. We tried to find you.
I couldn't face you, Jonah said roughly. If I'd stayed, we'd all be dead. Sarah's voice was firm.
You think those men would have spared us if you'd been there? You'd have died with our parents.
And Emma and I would have been found eventually. Your plan saved us. Your pursuit avenged us. You have nothing to be ashamed of. Maddox erupted from his chair. Lying witch, I wasn't. Cole Maddox, you're under arrest for murder. Marshal Titus had his gun drawn. Mrs. McAllister, would you be willing to testify in federal court?
Gladly.
As soldiers took Maddox into custody, the courtyard erupted. Weatherby tried to restore order, to return to land claims and mineral rights, but the momentum had shifted. Seems to me, the governor said once quiet returned, that this entire matter stems from corruption and intimidation. Mr. Weatherby, I'll be recommending a full federal investigation into Frontier and Rail Syndicate's practices in Wyoming territory. But our legal claims will be suspended pending investigation. Furthermore, any lands obtained through demonstrable duress will revert to original owners or their heirs. He looked at Lily.
Mrs.
Moreno, I believe that includes your property.
Yes, sir.
Then I see no impediment to you maintaining possession. He stood. This court is adjourned. Federal marshals will remain to oversee an orderly review of all disputed claims. As the crowd dispersed, Sarah Bracken McAllister approached Jonah and Lily.
I meant what I said. You carry too much guilt. Mr. Hayes, my parents would have thanked you for saving their daughters.
I thank you now. She embraced him briefly, then disappeared into the crowd, leaving Jonah stunned and Lily crying. That evening, the whole town seemed to gather at Mabel's rebuilt restaurant. The mood was celebratory but also reflective. Justice had been served, but the cost of Pike's greed would be felt for years. Sheriff Collins raised a toast to truth coming to light, to courage in the face of lies, and to neighbors who stand together. As glasses clinked, Ike Dawson approached Jonah.
That was a brave thing, telling your story like that. Not many men would have.
I had help. Jonah looked at Lily, who was laughing at something Mabel had said. I'm learning that carrying burdens alone just makes them heavier. Later, as they walked home under stars brilliant in the clear Wyoming sky, Lily asked,
How do you feel?
Jonah considered,
lighter, like I've been holding my breath for 3 years and can finally exhale. Sarah was right. You've been punishing yourself for surviving, for making the best choice you could with what you knew. She took his hand. Maybe now you can forgive yourself. Maybe. He stopped walking, turned to face her. Lily, after today seeing me like that, hearing what I did, I love you more. She said it simply, like stating the sky was blue. I saw a man admit his mistakes publicly. I saw a man who spent years trying to atone. I saw the man I'm going to marry stand up to lies with truth. Even truth that makes me look human, fallible, yes, even that. She smiled. Did you think I wanted to marry a plaster saint? I fell in love with a complicated man trying to be better? Today just proved I chose well. They reached the ranch house, their ranch house, and stood on the porch looking out at their land. The moon had risen, casting silver light over the grasslands. So what happens now? Lily asked, echoing her words from that night in the storm. Jonah pulled her close. Now we build that life we talked about. Gardens and horses and children. Now we prove that second chances are worth fighting for. And Maddox the syndicate. Let the federal boys handle them. We've got more important work. He gestured at the vast landscape. This valley's going to need healing. People learning to trust again. Families rebuilding. Seems like work worth doing. Together. Always together. They went inside to the warmth of their home, leaving the past on the porch with the evening shadows. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they had truth, they had justice, and they had each other. In the distance, a coyote howled at the moon, and the wind whispered through the cottonwoods by the creek. The land itself seemed to breathe easier, as if it too had been holding its breath, waiting for justice to prevail. The trial had ended, but the real work, the work of building community, of creating something lasting from the ashes of Pike's empire, that work was just beginning. The weeks following the trial brought a peculiar kind of peace to Sagebrush Flats, like the quiet after a storm, when folks take stock of what's damaged and what survived. Jonah found himself in the unexpected position of helping to rebuild not just his own life, but the entire community. Never thought I'd see the day Cole Maddox got hauled off in irons, Sheriff Collins mused, watching from his office window as a federal prison wagon prepared for the journey to Cheyenne. Justice has a way of arriving late, but sure. Sometimes. Jonah agreed, checking the shipping manifest on his desk. With Pike's corrupt network dismantled, legitimate business had returned to the valley. The freight office was busier than ever, though I'd trade all the justice in the world to have prevented those deaths. Can't change the past, son, but you can help shape what comes next. The sheriff turned from the window. Speaking of which, I'm getting too old for this job. Town's going to need a new sheriff come spring. You've got years left in you, Bo. Maybe, but I've been thinking it's time for younger blood. Someone who knows both sides of the law. Someone the town trusts. He gave Jonah a meaningful look. I'm a freight hauler. You're a man who stood up when it counted. That's what a sheriff is, when you boil it down. Collins headed for the door, then paused. Think about it. Town elections in March. After he left, Jonah sat contemplating the idea. Sheriff Hayes. It had a weight to it he wasn't sure he was ready to carry. But then, he'd thought the same about marriage, about settling down, about letting someone past his carefully constructed walls. A commotion outside drew his attention. Through the window, he saw Lily in the street, facing down Augustus Weatherby and what remained of Pike's legal team. Mail day had brought official notices confirming the return of seized properties, and apparently Weatherby had one last card to play. Irregular and possibly illegal, the lawyer was saying as Jonah stepped outside. My clients demand compensation for improvements made to these properties. Improvements. Lily's voice could have etched glass. You mean the fences you tore down, the wells you poisoned, the families you drove away? We have receipts for Mr. Weatherby.
Jonah's quiet interruption silenced the lawyer. "You're leaving on the afternoon train. I suggest you spend your remaining time packing rather than harassing the citizens of this town." "Is that a threat, Mr. Hayes?" "It's an observation. The federal investigators will be very interested in those receipts you mentioned. I'm sure they'll want to examine them closely. Very closely." Weatherby's face went pale. Without another word, he turned and hurried away, his remaining associates scrambling after him.
"I could have handled him,"
Lily said, though her smile was grateful. "I know, but sometimes it's nice to share the handling." He offered his arm. "Walk with me, I want to check on the Hendersons." The Hendersons were one of 5 families who'd returned to reclaim their properties after Pike's fall. Tom Henderson had been a friend of Miguel Moreno, driven out when he'd asked too many questions about mineral surveys. Now he was back with his wife Martha and 3 children, trying to resurrect their small ranch. They found the family working together to repair their barn, which had been vandalized in their absence. 8-year-old Lucy Henderson was gamely hauling boards while her older brothers hammered.
Mr. Hayes, Mrs.
"Lily?" Lucy abandoned her work to run over.
Pa says we're staying for good this time. Is it true?"
"It's true, sweetheart," Lily assured her.
"Your family's home to stay."
Tom Henderson climbed down from the roof, wiping sweat from his brow. "Can't thank you folks enough. If you hadn't stood up to Pike..." "We all stood up," Jonah corrected. "That's why it worked. Still, take someone to go first." Tom glanced between them. "Martha wanted me to ask, when's the wedding? She's hoping to organize a proper celebration." 2 weeks, Lily answered. "Just a small ceremony." "Small," Tom laughed.
"Ma'am, half the territory wants to attend."
"You 2 are heroes." "We're really not," Jonah began, but Lucy interrupted. "Yes, you are. Ma says you're like the knights in my storybook, 'cept better 'cause you're real." Later, as they rode back toward town, Lily was thoughtful. "She's right, you know. To them, we are heroes. How does that sit with you?" "Uncomfortably," Jonah admitted.
"Heroes don't have the kind of past I do."
"Maybe that's exactly why you're a hero. You chose to change, chose to stand for something better." She guided her horse closer to his. "That little girl doesn't need to know about your past. She needs to know that when evil came to her town, good people fought back." They were approaching the Willow Creek Ranch when they saw smoke rising, not the black smoke of destruction, but white smoke from a busy chimney. As they drew closer, they found their yard full of wagons and people. "What in the..." Jonah began.
"Surprise?"
Mabel Quinn emerged from the crowd, beaming. "Barn raising, well, technically it's a ranch fixing, but that doesn't sound as festive." The entire town, it seemed, had descended on their property. Men were repairing fences and reinforcing the barn. Women had set up outdoor kitchens, preparing enough food for an army. Children ran everywhere, their laughter bright as birdsong. "We can't accept this," Lily protested, even as tears gathered in her eyes.
"Course you can,"
Ike Dawson said,
hammer in hand. "You 2 have done for us. Now we do for you. That's how it works."
And so they joined in. Jonah working alongside men who'd become friends. Lily organizing with women who'd become sisters in struggle. As the sun tracked across the sky, the ranch transformed. New shingles on the roof, fresh paint on the shutters, fences straight and true. "Looking good," called a familiar voice. Sarah Bracken McAllister rode up, accompanied by Marshal Titus. She'd stayed to testify in Maddox's trial, which had concluded that morning. "Guilty on all counts," the marshal announced to cheers. "He'll hang come dawn. Justice for the Bracken family and a dozen others." Sarah dismounted. Approaching Jonah, "I wanted to say goodbye properly. I'm heading back to Denver tomorrow." "You could stay," Lily offered.
"The school needs a second teacher, and..."
"Thank you, but no." Sarah's smile was sad but determined. "This place holds too many ghosts for me. But I'm glad I came. Glad I could speak truth. She took Jonah's hand. Be happy. My parents would want that for you. As quickly as she'd come, she was gone, leaving Jonah with a sense of closure he hadn't known he needed. The work continued until sunset painted the mountains purple. Then Mabel, self-appointed master of ceremonies, called everyone to attention. Before we eat, there's something needs saying. She stood on a makeshift platform of planks and sawhorses. 6 months ago, this town was dying. Fear had us by the throat. Then these two, she pointed at Jonah and Lily, showed us we didn't have to accept it. They reminded us that courage is contagious, that standing together makes us stronger than any bully. Here, here, voices called out. So this ain't just a barn raising, it's a thank you, it's a promise. It's us saying that Sagebrush Flats takes care of its own. She raised a glass of her special punch, to Jonah and Lily, to new beginnings. The toast echoed across the gathering. Then fiddles appeared, and what had been a work party became a dance. Under stars and lanterns, the community celebrated not just a couple's upcoming wedding, but their own survival and renewal. Jonah, who'd spent years avoiding crowds and connections, found himself passed from group to group. Here, Ben Patterson wanted advice about starting a freight business. There, young Will Henley, the cowboy who defied Pike, sought guidance about proposing to his girl. You're smiling, Lily observed, catching him during a break in the dancing. Am I? He was. He realized. This is not what I expected when I came here. What did you expect? To hide, to haul freight and keep my head down until I died. He spun her slowly, marveling at how natural it felt. Instead, I found this. Life has a way of giving us what we need, not what we think we want. She leaned into him. Jonah, about what Sheriff Collins said. You heard that. The walls in the freight office are thin. You should consider it. I'm not sheriff material. Lily. Aren't you? You know the law from both sides? You've proven you'll stand for justice even at personal cost. People trust you. She pulled back to meet his eyes. More importantly, you care. That's rarer than you might think. Before he could respond, Ike Dawson approached with his fiddle. How about a tune for the engaged couple, something special? He began to play a waltz, sweet and slow. Other instruments joined in, and space cleared for Jonah and Lily to dance alone, as they moved together, surrounded by friends and neighbors. Jonah felt something he'd thought lost forever belonging. I love you, he said quietly, for her ears alone. I love you too, she replied. Sheriff Hayes. He laughed, spinning her again. You're not going to let that go, are you? Never. I'm going to be a sheriff's wife. Think of the respectability. Think of the danger. Jonah Hayes, I've been threatened, burned out of restaurants, and shot at. You think a little sheriffing is going to scare me now? The dance ended to applause, and the party continued late into the night. Stories were shared, plans were made, bonds were strengthened. When the last wagon finally rolled away, Jonah and Lily stood on their porch, surveying the transformed ranch. They did all this in one day. Lily marveled. The barn's better than new. The fences are perfect. They even fixed the squeak in the porch swing. They gave us more than labor. Jonah said, they gave us their trust, their friendship, their love. Lily added, this is what community really means. Isn't it not just living near each other, but living for each other? They sat on the newly repaired swing, listening to night sounds, crickets, a distant owl, the whisper of wind through cottonwoods. The house behind them was ready for their life together. The land around them was ready for their dreams. 2 weeks, Lily said. 2 weeks and I'll be Mrs. Hayes. Having second thoughts. Never, you... Only one. He turned to her, serious. I wish I could give you a quieter life. No past catching up. No people looking to us for leadership. Just peace.
Peace is overrated, she said firmly. I had peace when Miguel died. Safe, quiet, going through the motions, peace. It nearly killed my soul. She touched his face. You brought me back to life. Jonah, you in this fight in this town, I don't want quiet. I want purpose. Sheriff's wives don't get much quiet. Good thing I'm marrying a future sheriff then. She grinned at his expression. Oh, you'll take the job. Maybe not this election, maybe not the next, but someday, because it's who you are. A protector, a guardian, a man who stands between the darkness and the light. You make me sound noble. You are noble. You just wear it under all that trail dust and stoicism. She stood, pulling him up. Come on, future Sheriff Hayes. Let's go look at our kingdom. They walked to the hill behind the house, where they could see the lights of Sagebrush Flats in the distance. The town looked peaceful, prosperous even. No fires, no gunmen, no fear-darkening windows and hearts. We did that, Lily said softly. All of us together, but we were part of it. We helped save this place. It saved us too, Jonah replied. Gave us each other, gave us purpose. Then we're even. She leaned against him. This is a good life. Jonah, the one we're building. It's going to be a good life. Standing there under the vast Wyoming sky, surrounded by land that would know their children's footsteps and their grandchildren's laughter, Jonah believed her. The past would always be part of him, but it no longer defined him. The future stretched ahead, bright with promise. In 2 weeks, they'd wed. In spring, there'd be an election. In between, there'd be work and dreams and the slow, steady building of something lasting, a marriage, a ranch, a community, a home. Yes, he said, pulling Lily close. It's going to be a very good life. Below them, Sagebrush Flats settled into sleep, safe and free. And on a hill overlooking it all, 2 people who'd found each other against all odds stood witness to what love and courage could build when given half a chance. The stars wheeled overhead, eternal and bright, blessing all below with their ancient light. A year had passed since justice came to Sagebrush Flats, and spring arrived early that year of 1890, painting the Wyoming grasslands with wildflowers. The wind chimes on the porch of Willow Creek Ranch sang their gentle song as Lily Hayes stood watching the sunrise, one hand resting on her growing belly. You're up early, Jonah said, joining her with 2 cups of coffee. He handed her the tea she preferred these days, keeping the coffee for himself. The baby's restless, takes after his father, I think. She smiled as Jonah's hand joined hers. Always moving, always alert. Her father, he corrected gently. I'm certain it's a girl. We'll see in a few months. She leaned into him, contentment radiating from every line of her body. Hard to believe it's only been a year. Indeed, the changes were remarkable. Where once stood a struggling ranch, now thrived a small but profitable operation. The library addition Lily had dreamed of occupied the renovated barn's upper floor, serving travelers and townspeople alike. Below, Jonah's horse operation had grown from Ash and a few mares to a respectable herd. Sheriff Collins is stopping by today. Lily mentioned, about the election, I suppose. Jonah sighed. The spring election had seen him voted in as sheriff by a landslide. Despite his protestations, he'd accepted reluctantly, seeing it as another form of service. Probably about the railroad negotiations. They're proposing a new route again. But fairly this time, seems so, the federal oversight has kept them honest. He set down his cup. I need to check on Sage. She's close to foaling. They walked together to the pasture where their horses grazed. Ash, no longer alone, stood patriarch over his small herd. The gray Mustang had mellowed with age and companionship, but still maintained his fierce independence. Remember when he wouldn't let anyone else near him? Lily asked, watching Ash nuzzle one of the mares. He just needed to learn trust takes time. Jonah replied, We all did.
The sound of wagons announced visitors before they appeared. Not just Sheriff Collins, now simply Bo since his retirement, but half the town seemed to be arriving. Mabel Quinn's distinctive laugh carried across the morning air. What now? Jonah wondered aloud. It's Saturday, Lily reminded him. Reading day. Of course, Lily's literacy program had become a weekly tradition. Children and adults alike gathered to improve their reading, share stories, and build community. The library that had started as a dream now served as the valley's heart.
Saw Mrs. Hayes.
Lucy Henderson ran up, braids flying. Now 9 and confident, she clutched a worn book. I finished it, the whole thing.
Wonderful.
Lily knelt carefully, mindful of her condition. Tell me your favorite part. As Lucy launched into an enthusiastic recap, Jonah watched his wife work her magic. She had a gift for making each person feel valued, heard, important. It was part of what made her such an effective teacher and sheriff's wife.
Jonah,
Ike Dawson called out.
Got a minute? Want to talk about that irrigation project?
The morning filled with purposeful activity. While Lily led reading groups in the barn library, Jonah found himself mediating between farmers about water rights sheriff's work that had nothing to do with guns and everything to do with keeping peace. The creek's low this year, Ben Patterson was saying. If Henderson takes his usual amount, I've got crops to water. Tom Henderson protested. Same as you. Gentlemen, Jonah intervened calmly. Let's look at the actual water levels before we argue about shares. Ike, you've been monitoring the creek. They worked through the problem methodically, finding compromise where others might have found conflict. It was the new way in Sagebrush Flats: cooperation over confrontation, law over lawlessness. By noon, the ranch buzzed with activity. Children ran between the buildings while adults shared news and gossip. Someone had brought a fiddle, and impromptu music drifted through the air. This is what you dreamed of, Jonah said, finding Lily during a break. A place where people gather, learn, grow together. We dreamed it, she corrected. You built the shelves. Remember you helped paint the sign? The sign in question hung proudly over the barn door. Willow Creek Ranch horses, books, and hope for sale. Speaking of hope, Bo Collins approached, still spry despite his years. Got news from Cheyenne. The territorial government's approved funding for a proper school building. They cited your literacy program as evidence of community commitment to education. Lily's eyes filled with tears. A real school. 2 rooms. They're saying maybe 3 if the town keeps growing. Bo grinned. Seems folks want to move where their kids can get educated proper. You've made this place a destination, Lily. We all have, she insisted, but her joy was unmistakable. As afternoon wore on, Jonah noticed storm clouds building over the mountains. Looks like weather coming, he announced. Might want to start heading home. But the storm moved faster than expected. Within minutes, the sky darkened ominously. Wind whipped through the yard, sending papers flying. Everyone into the house, Jonah commanded, his sheriff's authority clear. Quickly now! They crowded inside just as the first fat raindrops fell. Thunder rolled across the valley like drums. But instead of fear, there was excitement. Children pressed against windows, adults continuing conversations by lamplight. Just like that first storm, Lily murmured to Jonah, when we were in the shed. Except now we have a house full of friends instead of just each other and hope. I don't know, she said, eyes twinkling. We still have each other and hope, just more company. The storm raged for an hour, fierce but cleansing. When it finally passed, leaving the world washed and gleaming, everyone ventured out to assess any damage. Look, young Will Henley pointed. Rainbow. Indeed, a perfect arc stretched across the valley, one end seeming to touch the ranch itself. Everyone stood transfixed by the beauty. If that ain't a sign of blessing, I don't know what is, Mabel declared. As people prepared to leave, many paused to express gratitude. not just for the shelter from the storm, but for everything the ranch had become sanctuary. School, symbol of renewal. Same time next week, they asked, and Lily assured them yes, always yes. Evening found Jonah and Lily alone again, sitting on their porch swing. The ranch was peaceful, chores done, horses settled. The wind chimes played their twilight song. Doc Holcomb says another month, maybe 6 weeks, Lily said, hands on her belly. Are you ready to be a father? I'm terrified. Jonah admitted. What if I'm like my father, cold, distant, harsh? You won't be. You're already different. Look how you've cared for this town, for me, for every lost soul who needed help. She took his hand. You'll love our child the way you love fiercely, protectively, with your whole heart. When did you get so wise? When I married a complicated man who showed me that broken things can be mended stronger than before. They swayed gently, watching stars appear in the deepening sky. Somewhere, an owl called, and another answered. The night sounds of home. I've been thinking about names, Lily said. If it's a boy, I'd like to call him Miguel Jonah, for the past and the future. And if it's a girl, Hope, because that's what she'll represent, what this whole place represents now. Hope Hayes. Jonah tested the name. I like it. A rider appeared on the road, moving fast. Jonah tensed automatically, hand moving toward the gun he no longer wore constantly. Sheriff Hayes, the rider called. Young Sam Porter from the telegraph office. Message from Marshal Titus. Jonah read quickly, then relaxed. The last of Pike's syndicate has been convicted. Federal prison for the lot of them. It's truly over. Sam grinned. Folks will sleep easier knowing that. Want me to spread the word? In the morning, tonight, let people rest peaceful. After Sam left, they returned to the swing. The night was warm, full of spring's promise. From the barn came the soft nickering of horses. From the house, the tick of the clock Mabel had given them as a wedding gift. My husband, the sheriff, Lily mused. Who would have thought? My wife, the teacher, rancher, and mother-to-be, he countered. Equally surprising. We're quite the pair. Yes, he agreed, pulling her close. We are. Time passed in comfortable silence. Then Lily spoke again. The town's changing, growing, families moving in, businesses opening. It won't be the same quiet place much longer. Change isn't always bad. Look what it brought us. True, but I want to remember this moment, this peace, this perfect balance before everything shifts again. She looked up at him. Promise me something. Anything. Whatever comes, more children, bigger responsibilities, harder challenges, promise we'll always have this time together on our porch, watching our corner of the world. I promise, he said solemnly. Every evening we can manage. We'll be right here. Good, she settled back against him. Because this is my favorite place in all the world. Not the house or the ranch or even the town. Just wherever you are. Lily Hayes, you're going to make me sentimental. Too late. You've been sentimental since you pulled me from that fire. You just hide it better than most. He laughed, the sound rich in the night air. It was true. The hard man who'd arrived in Sagebrush Flats was gone, transformed by love and community into someone he barely recognized but wholly embraced. Look there, Lily pointed. Shooting star. Make a wish. I have everything I want. You make one. Jonah thought for a moment. I wish for time. Years and years of this. Watching our children grow, our town prosper, our love deepen. Just time. That's a good wish, she said softly. As if in answer, another star streaked across the heavens, then another. Soon the sky was alive with celestial fire, a display that seemed arranged just for them. Miguel would have loved this, Lily said without sadness. He always said the stars were God's way of reminding us how small our troubles really are. He was right. In the grand scheme, we're just specks. But what magnificent specks we can be." She laughed, the sound bright as the shooting stars.
Listen to you, getting philosophical. Next you'll be writing poetry.
"Only for you," he said, meaning it. The meteor shower continued. Each streak a wish, a prayer, a promise. On their porch, two people who'd found each other through tragedy and triumph sat witness to the universe's grand display. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. The sheriff's job, the ranch work, the preparations for their child. There would be disputes to settle, horses to train, students to teach, the ordinary business of living in an extraordinary place. But tonight, there was just this: the creak of the swing, the chime of wind catchers, the vast tapestry of stars, and love strong enough to rebuild two broken hearts into something whole and wonderful. "I love you," Jonah said, words that still felt new despite months of saying them. "I love you too," Lily replied. "My complicated, wonderful, heroic husband. Just a freight hauler who got lucky. Just a sheriff who saved a town. Just a man who learned to hope again." She kissed him gently. "Just exactly who you're supposed to be." The stars continued their dance, and on a porch in Wyoming, two souls found perfect peace in each other's arms. The past was healed, the future bright with promise, and the present, this exact, perfect moment, was everything they'd ever dreamed of. In the distance, a coyote sang to the moon. The wind whispered through cottonwoods, and love, patient and kind and strong as the mountains themselves, sheltered all beneath its endless grace. The story that began with dust and desperation had found its ending in starlight and joy. But really, it was not an ending at all. It was a beginning. Thank you so much for listening to this story of love and redemption in the Old West. I'm curious, where in the world are you listening from? Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss what touched your heart in Jonah and Lily's journey. If this tale of courage and second chances moved you, please subscribe to Wild West Night for more authentic frontier stories. Hit that like button and press the hype button to help more people discover this story. Until we meet again on the trail, partners,